Can you imagine your life where money is your friend, working with you to achieve all your dreams and desires? If you struggle seeing money as your friend, then join Kathy Cook Noble, financial advisor and educator on understanding how your money can work for you. It is possible. Now, here is Financially Speaking with Kathy Cook Noble.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I'm Ashlee Quinn-Hogan. I'm your host for this evening. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different from what we've been doing in the past. With 2022 sort of coming in hot and getting us all, onto the path. I feel like we've flown through the first bit of 2022. I don't know about anyone else, but like we're already here, just about finished. About a quarter of the way through, which is crazy to me. But yeah, we're going to be talking a little bit about scholarships today, which is something I've never talked about on the show before. And I'm really excited to talk about because it's something that I spend a lot of my time doing or learning about as a student and as a scholar. And so I want to share a little bit of that information with everyone today. I know that, with the nicer weather coming, sort of the last thing we're thinking about is school, and I kind of get that too. I mean, I'm just getting ready to finish up here on my first year of my master's, which is crazy and exciting all in one. Sometimes I still feel like I'm in high school, which is weird to say, but like it's been a while. I'm not going to age myself here and say how long I've been out of high school, but it's crazy to think about, the fact that I've done, a whole degree and now I'm halfway done a second degree. And I mean, stay tuned to figure out if we go for that third one. Right now, I'm sitting on the fence in terms of what the move is there, but, I digress. With school kind of wrapping up, I mean, it's time to, obviously give yourself a little bit of a break. I'm going to be doing that as well, but it's time to start thinking about, are you going to university? Is it going to be your first year in university? Starting college? Are you someone like me who's just kind of in the middle of their academic career, but is still looking for ways to fund their education? So whether, you're doing, for those of us in Canada who are doing like a undergraduate or a bachelor's degree, moving up to like graduate level studies, is that something you're considering, something you're looking at funding? Maybe you're like me and you're already at the graduate level and you're looking to go into a PhD or like a postdoctoral fellowship or whatever the case is. Maybe you're in high school and you're just looking to explore a little bit what's out there in terms of scholarships for when the time does come. Or, maybe you're a parent and you're looking at your child's education fund, and you might be able to use a little bit of support there, which, I hear you. It's times are tough and education's expensive. So all of that being said, we're going to talk a little bit about, first of all, how to find scholarships that are worth applying to. I know that there are tons of scholarships out there that, I'm not going to say they're a waste of time, but, does the amount of effort you have to put in, does it equate to the amount of reward you're going to get from writing it, right? If you're putting in hours and hours in and it's, a couple $100, is it worth it? Maybe for some it is, maybe for some it isn't. And that's totally up to you on an individual basis. But then, also there's scholarships out there that, they're not as reliable, or I want to say trustworthy as some. And so I'm going to teach you how to sort of pick out the best scholarships to apply to. But most importantly, once you find those really great scholarships that are legit and are worth your effort, how to actually write a winning application, because that's the main thing, right? You could write scholarship applications and until the cows come home, but if you're not going to write a winning application, then what the heck's the point? So I'm going to give you some of my tips because I am a scholarship fiend. I love writing applications for scholarships. I love winning scholarships. And I love, helping people to also benefit from some financial support via scholarships or grants or bursaries or whatever. That, this kind of I'm going to use scholarships as like an all-encompassing term to refer to all of these sort of monetary support systems that we have in place here in Canada. I'm not super familiar with scholarship opportunities outside of Canada. I know there are some that span all of North America. So individuals from Canada and the United States, and other regions as well. So sometimes European, or sometimes it'll limit them to the UK. Just be specific with, or be intentional rather, with the scholarships you're looking at and making sure that you actually qualify. But we will talk about eligibility and how to make sure that you're applying for scholarships that you should be applying to, and not wasting your time applying to those that you should not be applying to. So, one of the main things about education is that it's expensive. And so no matter sort of how your education is being funded, or for those of you that are parents, how you're funding your child's education, sometimes parents are super supportive and they sort of take the brunt of the load on tuition costs and living costs. Sometimes students, such as myself, are fully responsible for their own education and their own living arrangement, which is also fine. Sometimes, I find that it's usually a mixture of both. So parents are super supportive and helpful, but they do want their child to have a little bit of responsibility for paying for some of the aspects, whether it be the living or whether it be tuition or textbooks or whatever. And then most of the time, I want to say a lot of us rely on government funding as well. I know that's absolutely true for me. There's a lot of great resources in terms of the Ontario government, for those of us that are in Ontario, for those of us that are in Canada, the federal government. And I'm not super sure what the equivalent of that would be in the United States, but that would be something worth looking into. And I know those of us that are out of province have equivalents to what we have here in Ontario, which is called OSAP. That's a great tool to use if you do require funding, and they have eligibility criteria for that as well. But thing about OSAP and government funding is that it doesn't always cover everything. And when it comes to education, my kind of policy is that you can never really have enough money. And I mean, tuition's expensive, but textbooks are expensive, materials, if you're living on campus or even if you're living off campus, can get expensive, as well as sort of like the social aspect of school too, right? So scholarships are super helpful in just giving you that little extra boost and just sort of supplementing what you already have. By all means, I'm assuming you could, if you worked really, really hard, you could fund your entire education off scholarship money. If you got really good at writing applications and you had a lot of time to do so. But I use it mostly as a supplemental form of support for my education. So I make sure that I kind of have it all taken care of. And then if, a scholarship comes in halfway through the year, at the beginning or the end of the year, whatever the case is, then it's just kind of that extra little buffer for either next year or for to support whatever type of, at this stage in my education, it's more of a research thing. So it supports my research and my educational goals. But yeah, so I spent a lot of time looking into scholarships and writing applications. And so I've kind of put together my top 5 tips for writing winning scholarship applications. And we'll talk a little bit about what you can use scholarship money for, because I know that that's a topic that not everyone knows. Whether the scholarship goes directly to the school for tuition, whether it goes into your bank account, what's sort of allowed and not allowed for using scholarship money. So we'll chat a little bit about that. And one thing I do want to also discuss is sort of the diversity aspect, as we'll talk about scholarship diversity as well, because there's a ton of different scholarships out there, and there's a ton of sort of variety in terms of which ones you should be or should not be applying to, or which ones will, you're most likely to be successful in receiving, and which ones are, like I said before, not necessarily a waste of time, but maybe not the best use of your resources. So we will chat a little bit about that too. And, one thing I say in almost every episode in terms of investing and money and all of that is that the best time is to start now. So whether you're in grade 9, or you're in grade 12, you're in your first year of your university or college program, or you're in the last year. If you haven't started, looking into scholarships yet, maybe now's the time to take a look. You can never, start too early, and you'd be surprised. I will agree that the majority of scholarships out there are for high school students that are in their last year and are going to be starting their university or college career in the fall. But there's also scholarships out there for everyone. So there is scholarships out there for university students who are in their second year or their third year, or they're in graduate school. There's all kinds of scholarships out there. So it just takes the time to sit down and look, and to figure out what it is that you want to apply for, and what you're eligible to apply for, and then kind of going ahead and writing all the applications for those, and we'll talk about how to do that the most effectively. So the first sort of tip, I guess we'll jump right into it. The first tip I have is kind of more of like a bonus tip, because it comes before you even start the writing process, or the searching process, I guess, and that is to get involved in your community. So the one thing I see the most when looking at scholarships, or to applying for scholarships, or even just speaking with other students and colleagues of mine who have applied for scholarships or research grants, or what have you, is that there's a huge emphasis on community involvement. And the reason for that is that as sort of we progress into a digital society, grades are definitely important, but grades start to become similar, and they start to cluster around the very top end. So, maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago, it was enough to have, a 95 average, or 4.3, or whatever the case is. It was enough to just have the grades, and you could rely on that. And I'm not saying that that's not the case here, but what scholarships, or organizations awarding scholarships rather, like to see now is, when you have a whole collection of individuals who have that 92, 93, 94 average, what really differentiates them, right? Like, what makes the difference between somebody who has a 93 and somebody who has a 94? So they'll start to look at, volunteer initiatives and community involvement, and how these individuals made an impact on their community. And honestly, that's not always secondary. So sometimes organizations don't even look at grades as a primary form of decision making. They'll go straight to how this individual has been performing in the community. And so, one important thing to think about before you even get to that point where it's time to apply to scholarships or to write applications is, how is that application going to look? Like, how much of an impact have you had on your community that you can add into that application to give yourself that little extra boost when it comes to it? Because, if I'm being honest, I think that it holds a ton of weight. I know that grades also hold a ton of weight. We will talk about the significance of grades and the lack of, because I know that some people get, a little bit defeated when they think about writing scholarships, because maybe they don't have that 95 or that 98 that everybody else has that's applying. And that's okay. We will talk about that in a little bit. But in terms of the community involvement, that's a good way to supplement that. If you don't have competitive grades, right? It's really competitive these days in terms of funding your education, because everybody, a lot of people are going to post-secondary, a lot of people are going to university and college, and doing graduate school or their PhDs. And so, like, what sets you apart from other people? That's the main question you want to ask yourself. Are you just a number on a page? Are you a 95? Because there's nothing to stick your nose up at about that. But you want to have something that actually sets you apart in more of a crucial way. Sets you apart in a crucial way, other than just like a percentage point. Is what is the kind of the point I'm getting at here. So look to your community. What initiatives exist in your community that you care about, that you can be a part of, and don't just go and do things that you don't want to do, or do things that you think will look good on a resume. Do things that are meaningful to you, because then I promise you, you'll enjoy it, you'll get a lot out of it, and that'll be reflected in your scholarship application. And that's one of the things I did throughout high school and even throughout my undergraduate career, is I got involved in things that in my community that meant a lot to me. And giving back to my community still does mean a whole lot to me, and I still do a lot of community involvement. But if you're not doing that already, get started. I know that for high school students, a big part of high school is those community service hours, and that's, I think, part of the significance, is they want you to form that connection in your community so you can continue that throughout your education and throughout your entire life. And it'll be really good to see that on a scholarship application. So that's the first tip, is to get involved in your community, see what initiatives or programs or organizations exist in your area that are meaningful to you and that you can become involved in and that you can write about on a scholarship application, and that will set you apart. And you can say, hey, I did X, Y, and Z for the past 2, 3, 4 years, and this is what I learned from it, and this is what I have to offer because of it. And make sure that you're out there looking for those opportunities, because I will tell you that scholarship applications look a lot better when you have something sort of qualitative or tangible to grasp onto, other than just a percentage. So that's tip number one. Before we get into any more of the tips, we are going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll chat a little bit more about, we'll move on from tip number one, we'll move on to the next tip, and we'll chat a little bit more about how to write these winning applications. I'm Ashlee Quinn-Hogan, and you're listening to Financially Speaking on the Inspired Choices Network. We'll be right back.
Can you imagine your life where money is your friend, working with you to achieve all your dreams and desires? If you struggle seeing money as your friend, then join Kathy Cook-Noble, financial advisor and educator, on understanding how your money can work for you. It is possible. Now, here is Financially Speaking with Kathy Cook-Noble.
Hey everyone, welcome back. So before we went on break, we were just talking about sort of tip 1 out of 5 that I had, and I kind of said it was a bonus tip. It was before you even start the writing process or the application process. You want to get involved in your community. And the main reason I had for that is that a lot of scholarships these days, it's not enough to just have a really high grade, or to have the specific courses, or to have a really good reference, which we will talk about as well. They want to see that you've been involved in the community, and they want to see that you've made a lasting impact, or that you've done something that contributes to your sort of academic career, your academic resume. And so make sure you're out there looking at opportunities in your area to get involved in. Nothing's too big or too small. As long as you're getting involved and you're doing something that matters to you, then that's perfect. And sort of kind of going on top of that is our next tip, which is tip number 2, is to take the time when researching and applying for scholarships. So I know that a lot of people, their excuses for not applying to scholarships is, oh, I don't have time, or it's really time consuming, and I have X, Y, and Z to do. I work, or I have my own classes, or I have yada yada yada. The excuses can go on and on and on, which is fine. I know, I've been there. We all get it. But if you take the time, so now during the whatever time it is, the end of the school year when it's not super busy, over the summer even would be a good option to take the time and sit down and look at which scholarships are out there that exist, and take the time to research and figure out what scholarships you're interested in applying to. How much are they offering? What are the eligibility criteria? What are the components of the application that I need to be paying attention to, so that I can set myself up for success? And so one of the things I like to do when I'm looking at scholarships is, obviously during your busiest time of the year, maybe scholarships fall lower on the priority list. And that's true for me as well. They're not the the most important thing on my list all of the time, but they are the most important thing on my list some of the time. And so during those times when I'm not super bogged down with my own work or my own sort of initiatives, I take the time to sit down and look at new scholarship opportunities. And my sort of rule for this is, look early and look often. So, start looking early if you're in high school, if you're in your undergraduate degree, if you're in graduate school. There's no better time than now to start looking and just sort of go through with a list and make a list of everything, all the scholarships you find that you think would be, beneficial to apply to. So take note of, how much it is that these scholarships are offering in terms of funding. Write down sort of what's all encompassed in the application process. Is it an essay? Is it just an application form? Is it a video submission? What is it, right? There's all kinds of different scholarships. And that's also a misconception that I guess I should touch on, is that not all scholarships are essay-based. So I know that a lot of them are, and a lot of people get sort of caught up in, I'm not good at writing, or I don't want to write an essay for something if it's going to be pointless, or if there's not going to be a grade attached to it. I've been there. Usually we only write essays when there's some benefit to us, right? Such as a grade or because we have to. But not all scholarships are essay-based. There's a ton of scholarships out there. There's a lot of like needs-based scholarships. So it's for financial support, and it's on the basis of your sort of financial portfolio. So, how much money you or sometimes maybe your parents bring in, and how much your educational costs are going to be. And some scholarships will offset the difference of that. And then, there's also like volunteer-based scholarships. So like I just said, make sure you're getting involved in the community, because a lot of these scholarships are given based on, how much involvement you've had, how many community service hours, how much dedication. And then there's research-based scholarships as well. So have you done any research? Do you have any publications? Do you have anything you're interested in researching? Sometimes you don't even have to have a ton of experience. If you just have that interest, that's enough. So don't get, discouraged by the fact that you're maybe not a strong essay writer. Not all scholarships are essay-based. And so that comes with the research process, is looking at what scholarships you think that you would be able to submit a strong application for, and sort of what's all encompassed in that. So we do have a quick question here. I'm going to just jump in and grab before I continue. Is there a service to assist students with finding and writing scholarships? So to answer the question, yes, for the most part. That's also a good part of the research process, is depending on the scholarship. For some of the really common ones, if you're in high school, for example, your academic counseling department should be well versed in scholarship writing and helping write those scholarships and apply to those. If you're in university, again, your academic advisory sort of department, whatever, it's called something different at every university. For us, it's our academic counseling office. But also like the writing center at a university would be a good resource to use. In terms of an online resource, I know that there's a few hubs, I guess is what I would call them, where a bunch of scholarships are sort of collected, and they can disperse that information to students, and you can sign up through email. And so you'll get email reminders, like kind of like notifications, like if you're on social media, that will tell you when a new scholarship's been uploaded, and you can just check out the information there. But one of the things that I found, and one of the reasons I decided to do this as an episode, is because I didn't find a really great resource that had everything I needed, that laid out, all of the information about the scholarships and then helped with the writing process. Writing up scholarship applications is something that's a little bit dubious, I guess you could say. I don't think a lot of people offer great, information on how to actually go about writing scholarships. And that was kind of the point of me making this, is to give my insight the best that I can, because I kind of came up with my own system, because that there was a lack of information there for me. But if you seek out the resources, absolutely they're out there. But there's not that I know of, I guess. If anybody else knows of one, feel free to share that information with me. But I don't know of any sort of service that exists that will sit down and actually help you write a winning scholarship application. So here I am trying to do that in one short hour. But anyway, I hope that was a sufficient answer. And with that, I'm going to get back into sort of the steps here. So just to sort of recalibrate, step number one was to start before you even start writing, to get involved in the community. That was step number one. Step number two is to invest the time in research and applying. So you want to make sure that you're checking early and you're checking often. That's always my mentality when I think about scholarships. Go online, do a Google search. There's tons of platforms out there that take scholarships and put them into sort of one domain. So I know that for those of us that are in Canada, Scholarships Canada, they have a ton of information. Not all of them will be relevant or applicable. Some of them you can only apply to if you go to a certain university. Some of them are for example, there's a lot of scholarships out there that are for women. Some are based on programs. So go through and filter and figure out which scholarships you can apply to and make a list. Those scholarship sites can be reliable, but just be careful when you're looking at some of the ones that aren't verified. So Scholarships Canada is a good one. And then anything that's sort of referenced through your university or your college sort of website. So if you go on to your university homepage and you go to academic support or financial support or whatever it is that your university calls it, there should be information on there about how to apply for scholarships. And they should usually have 3, 4, 5 strong ones that they suggest students apply to. And that's probably your best tool, to be honest with you, because those are the ones that are usually, well, first of all, they're most reliable because your university is backing them up. Second of all, I find that they're usually the highest in funding. So sometimes when you just do a Google search, you'll find some that are worth applying to, but they're not as high in reward. So the ones that your university supports usually have the highest payoff, and those are where I would choose to look first, and then default to Google searches for other supports. The third sort of area that I like to look is financial institutions sometimes offer some good scholarships. So TD, for example, I know offers a graduate scholarship, and I know that other banks here in Canada do a similar thing. You'll have to forgive me because I don't know if the States is the same in that. But Canada, definitely financial institutions do offer scholarships to students. That's the other place I like to look. And sort of tying in with that first point of getting involved in the community, there are a lot of community partners out there that partner with different schools, and they do offer scholarships. So I know like Kinsman clubs usually do that. Sometimes you'll find other like non-for-profits that offer scholarships. All kinds of organizations in the community offer scholarships to their volunteers or to members of the community who are part of that organization, or sometimes just the community in general. So the more you get involved in the community, the more you find out about these things. And some of the best scholarship opportunities I found out about come from these relationships I've made with the community. And so, when you're researching, make sure you're being sort of diligent and looking everywhere that you should be. And yeah, so go to your university website, do a Google search if you have to, look at your community, look to your community for support as well. Like I said, some of those really good opportunities come from community involvement. And then, kind of go through and see if there's anything on like Scholarships Canada or anything like that that can also be used to highlight some of those really important scholarships. So that's tip number 2. to just kind of go through and do some research on it. I mean, they're not just going to fall into your lap, right? You kind of got to go out and seek those opportunities. The odd time, I mean, you will get a grant or a bursary just for existing. Those are kind of cool, but don't expect that to happen, and don't expect those to be a lot of money. If you want, those bigger scholarships, kind of have to go out and seek those. So do the research, make a list of scholarships that look appealing in terms of monetary reward, but also in terms of how much work you have to put in, and if you think you'd be a good candidate for it. So we are going to take another quick break. We're just kind of flying through it here today. And when we come back, we'll get on to steps 3, 4, and 5 for writing these winning scholarship applications. I'm Ashlee Quinn-Hogan, and you're listening to Financially Speaking on the Inspired Choices Network. We'll see you shortly.
Too many of us get caught up in the unreal lives of reality television and complete to acquire stuff, which is setting us up to accumulate lots of debt. We're scared, confused, and don't know who to talk to. By tuning into Financially Speaking radio show with financial advisor and educator Kathy Cook-Noble, you'll learn tips you can use to improve your financial health, which in turn can improve your overall health and make for a very happy life. Live a life you can afford and enjoy. It is possible. Listen for Financially Speaking radio show every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Mountain, and 1 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. Money is complicated, right? Actually, no, it's not. You don't have to be a trader on Wall Street to get a handle on your money. TV shows often instill fear to keep you believing you can't understand it or do anything yourself. If dealing with your finances brings up a lot of other F words, then you need to read All Ladies Should Use the F Word, A Guide to Loving Your Finances by Kathy Cook-Noble. Kathy helps you take control of your finances and leave the other F word, fear, in the dust.
How wonderful would it be to carry your favorite Inspired Choices Network host with you throughout your day? Well, now you can. Inspired Choices Network now has its very own mobile app. Our free app offers live streaming shows, along with thousands of podcasts and TV episodes. Our shows cover a wide variety of topics. Whether you're waking up with us, carrying us through the day, and taking us to bed with you, we're always here for you to enjoy. We're easy to find. Just search for Inspired Choices Network in the Apple App Store or Google Play Store.
This is the Financially Speaking Show with financial advisor and educator Kathy Cook-Noble. To participate in the program, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email by sending to Kathy@bookkeepplus.ca. Now back to the program.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Before we went on break, we were talking about the first 2 tips for writing winning scholarship applications. The first being to get involved in the community before you even start looking or thinking about writing. And the second one being to take the time to actually research and look at the opportunities that exist out there. And I was talking a little bit about looking to community organizations for support, because a lot of community organizations, they don't broadcast it or really advertise that they offer scholarships, but they do. And there was a comment in the chat as well that another good one is military associations. So like the Air Force and the Army, a lot of those organizations offer scholarships to the children of whether they're in the Army or the Air Force or part of the military. They offer scholarships for those children as well, or those students, and grandchildren and family members. And so that's worth looking into as well. And, sometimes, you don't really think about them, and they're not advertised on a widespread website, such as like Scholarships Canada or anything like that. So go through and think about, the organizations in your life that you could look into. You go to their website, or you could go in person, or you could speak to somebody who works for the organization or whatever, right? So take the time to research and to look at what is actually out there, because I think a lot of the time we forget that these places are offering these kinds of support to their community members. And if it's not advertised and it's not sort of, thrown at us, we don't think to go out and search for it. So take that initiative, go out and find those organizations that are offering support to students. So with that, let's move on to our third step, which is to strategize and prioritize. And this is one of the most important steps, I think. What I like to do is, so in step 2, when I'm going through and looking at all the opportunities out there that do exist, I make a list and I sort of write out the names or, something to remind me of what the scholarship is. Or, instead of writing it out, you could even just print it out, right? A lot of the times they'll have like an information sheet or an application form. Print it out or write it out, whatever suits your fancy, and make a list. Keep a list of all the scholarships that you've looked at. You don't have to apply to all of them, but keep a list of the ones that you're either interested in or that something about it resonates with you. And keep track of the important details. So when is it due? When is the application due? Because they do have due dates, and you don't want to miss it if it's one you want to apply to. So what's the due date? How much is the scholarship for? Is it $100? Is it $1,000? Is it $5,000? Whatever. Keep track of that as well. And then keep track of what it is that you need as a part of the application process. So the thing with scholarships is that they're all different. Some of them will ask for a quick online, just basically an information application form. So it'll ask for like your name, your birthday, where you study, what you're studying, whatever. Most often than not, there will be some form of question and answer. So whether that's the form of an essay, sometimes you'll get a more creative sort of take on it. They'll ask for some form of submission, whether it be video or short story or poem or whatever, creative dance, whatever. I'm sure that exists as well. But they'll ask for some form of interpretive response from you. More often than not, that it's an essay. And sometimes they'll ask for financial information. Sometimes that'll be a part of the application. If it's like a needs-based scholarship, they'll ask you sort of what your income has been or what your parents has been if you're still a dependent. And they'll ask you sort of what your tuition costs are, what your expenses are expected to be for the year. So some of them will ask for that. Some of them will ask for references, which is another important one that I think people tend to forget about. And you don't want to be, stuck trying to come up with a reference when your scholarship application is due at 11:59 p.m. and it's 6 p.m. That sucks. So that's why I say start early and start often, is because, go through, like do your research, go through and make a list of what's needed. And, think about those key people that you can ask to be a reference if you need it. So a lot of the time, those are going to be academic references. So if you're a high school student, you'll want to get a teacher that you've preferably built a good relationship with, or you've done well in their class. I wouldn't necessarily go ask somebody who you got like a C in their class, but to each their own. Or sometimes it'll be, if it's a community-based scholarship, they'll ask for somebody you've worked with in the community. So whether that be like a supervisor for a non-for-profit that you volunteered with, or whatever, right? So someone from the community that can speak to your like interpersonal skills. And sometimes they're a personal reference, which is like not a family member, but somebody who knows you well, whether it be like a friend of the family, or it can even be a professional capacity if it's somebody that you've known for quite some time. And sometimes, more often than not, it's a combination of those. So we'll ask for 2 or 3 references, maybe 1 academic, 1 personal, or 2 academic, 1 personal, whatever. So make sure you're paying attention to what each scholarship requires of you, and add that into your list as well. And, with the number of scholarships that exist out there, some will resonate with you and some won't, and that's okay. You don't have to apply to them all, but just know that there's a ton out there that you can be applying to. So once you sort of have your list, what I like to do is go and look at the due dates, because a lot of them have due dates that sort of overlap. So a lot of them will be due around the time that your your application to universities due, or around the beginning of the school year. Some of them are at the end. So it kind of just depends on what scholarship you're looking at. I know a lot of them have that like December 1st deadline for whatever reason. I think it's because it's kicking off into the second semester or the second term. But look at the deadlines for those, and make sure, once you have those deadlines, you're kind of making a schedule for yourself. So what I like to do is, if I know that there's a scholarship I really want to apply for, I think I have a really good chance of winning. And let's say, it's due in 3 months from now. So I'll actually go to my agenda and I'll lay out a plan for the next 3 months. I know when it's due and I know what the components are. I know that I need to write an essay answering 3 different questions. I know that I need to have my financial information, and I know that I need to have an academic reference. So I'll make a point of locking in that academic reference first and foremost, because there is, it's a question, right? There is a chance they're going to say no. More often than not, they don't. A lot of the times, if you're asking a teacher or a professor to be a reference for you for a scholarship, they're more than happy to. But go ahead and ask them more off or sooner than rather than later, and lock that reference in. Your financial information, usually people have that readily available, or at least with little effort. But the essay is the part that's probably going to set you apart from the rest. So if you have that 3 months until the deadline, maybe you have 2 months, maybe a month, but for the sake of argument, let's say 3 months. Set out an outline for yourself on how you're going to get that written. If you're the type of person who wants to sit down and write that all the night before, then more power to you. I'm not that person. I like to draft and draft and draft and draft. And I think that's usually a solid course of action when you're writing a paper that's going to be competing against other papers for some form of reward. So what I do is, if I know my scholarship applications due in 3 months, I'll get my agenda out and say, okay, well, this week, Monday and Tuesday are really, really busy, but I have a little bit of free time on Wednesday. So maybe I'll go there and draft out a response to question 1. And then the rest of the week's kind of busy, but next week, Monday and Tuesday are kind of freed up. So maybe I'll go in and that day I'll draft up responses to question 2. And then the following week's kind of a mess, but the week after that, I'm on reading week. So I can do the rest of the essay then. And then after that, I can just go ahead and edit it. And I mean, 3 months seems like a lot of time, but it's really just 12 weeks. And with life and school and everything that comes up, it's not a ton of time. So make that schedule for yourself. So you're not kind of scrambling at the last minute, especially if you have multiple scholarships due around the same time. You want to keep yourself on track. So go ahead and organize yourself. And that's one of the best pieces of advice I can give, is to write out your due dates so you don't forget them, highlight them, write them in red, circle them, whatever your strategy is for remembering due dates, write it, put it on the calendar, and make sure because there's nothing more annoying than writing a really good essay or an application and then finding out that it was due last week, right? So make sure you're checking and you're rechecking. And I would even say, once you have that list of the scholarships that you want to apply for, cross out any that you're like, I don't really have time to do 3 that week, so maybe I'll pick 1 or I'll pick 2, and rank them in order of their relevance. So I like to rank them in order of due date, with the first being the one that's due first, and then go from there. But maybe you have one that's due a little bit later but has the most reward going to be given, so maybe that's your first priority, is to start there. And that's fine. However you rank it is up to you, but I do suggest you prioritize your list, because sometimes things come up and you'll have good intentions and you'll have a list of like 5 or 6 scholarships, but maybe in the end you only end up applying to like 3 or 4, which is absolutely fine. But if you prioritize, you can make sure you're getting applications sent to those ones that have the biggest payoff. So that's tip number 3, is just kind of stay organized and to prioritize and strategize which scholarships you're writing and how you're going about writing them. I do have 2 more tips for you, but we are going to head into our last break of the show here quickly. And when we get back, we'll cover those next 2 tips. So I'm Ashlee Quinn-Hogan, and you've been listening to Financially Speaking on the Inspired Choices Network. We'll see you shortly.
Too many of us get caught up in the unreal lives of reality television and complete to acquire stuff, which is setting us up to accumulate lots of debt. We're scared, confused, and don't know who to talk to. By tuning into Financially Speaking radio show with financial advisor and educator Kathy Cook-Noble, you'll learn tips you can use to improve your financial health, which in turn can improve your overall health and make for a very happy life. Live a life you can afford and enjoy. It is possible. Listen for Financially Speaking radio show every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Mountain, and 1 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. This is the Financially Speaking Show with financial advisor and educator Kathy Cook-Noble. To participate in the program, join our live studio audience in our chat room at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. You can also make the choice to ask or comment by email by sending to Kathy@bookkeepplus.ca. Now back to the program.
Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. Before we went on break, we covered the first 3 tips of writing legendary scholarship applications rather. I do have 2 more tips for you. The 4th one's also super important, and I think one that we tend to not really think about, but it's follow instructions. So a lot of these, like 99% of these applications will have very strict instructions on what you ought to do to be successful. And a lot of them can weed people out right away by not following instructions. So make sure during that research process, or once you've researched and you've locked in, your 2, 3, 4 scholarships that you really want to apply for, make sure you go in and research those in a little bit more depth and find out, okay, what is it exactly that I need to do to be successful? If they ask for a 500-word essay, write them a 500-word essay. Don't write them 400 words. Don't write them 600 words. Write them 500 words. They tend to have a little bit of leniency, but I wouldn't bank on that. They ask for 500 words, write 500 words. They ask for your resume or your CV to be laid out in a certain format, lay it out in a certain format. If they ask you for an application sheet to be submitted by a certain date or a certain time, have it submitted by a certain time. They ask your reference form to be filled out in a certain way, have it filled out in a certain way. It's a really easy thing to forget to do or to get caught up in and think that it doesn't necessarily matter, but I promise you that it does. And these organizations that are offering the scholarships, usually they're academic based, these ones, they ask for it that way for a reason. And that's part of it is to see if you can follow instructions. But the second part is because it makes the process of choosing a winner or winners a lot easier for them. And the easier you make their lives, the happier they're going to be. And, the process goes a lot smoother and you're likely to be rewarded because of that. So if you're kind of the person submitting like a 900-word essay when it should have been 500, it's probably a really easy way to weed you out of the process. So make sure you're following instructions when you're writing these applications in terms of what they're asking for and how they're asking for it. Don't overlook the little things because those are really important and those can be the difference between you winning and you not winning. And with that comes our final step, which is, I've already said it, I've kind of foreshadowed it throughout the entire show, but look early and look often. And I can't stress this enough. It's something that I do. I take, 15, 20 minutes, I don't do it every single day, but, a few times a week and look to see what new opportunities are out there. Because there's continually new scholarship opportunities being uploaded. And some aren't uploaded on January 1st when you think to look, because they either haven't existed yet or the application portal hasn't been open yet. So you don't have to do it every day, but every few weeks just take a look, go to your university website, go to Scholarships Canada or whatever Google search that you're doing, look for your community organizations and just do a quick search in terms of what new scholarships might have come up. I know university financial aid office is usually really, really good at keeping tabs on which opportunities are new or are being released. So going to your university website is a good tactic for doing that. But don't rely on them to reach out to you. I know that some schools are good for that. They'll email you and say, such and such a scholarship is accepting applications until, a week from today. And usually it's pretty late when they send it out. So if you go and be proactive and take the initiative to go ahead and find those opportunities on your own, you're gonna have a little bit more time to work on the application. And like I said, make a list of the scholarships you want to do and prioritize that list. That's kind of the most important piece of advice I can give there. And work on your applications a little bit every day or a little bit every week. It makes it a lot less daunting than saving them all up until the day before they're due and trying to crank out 2 or 3 scholarship applications overnight. It'll also be reflected in the quality of your application. And I know that it's like trying to drill it into a brick wall here, but you tell students like you can't do it overnight. And I think for scholarships, that's really true. Being someone who's written a lot of scholarships, I can tell the quality of my application by how much time I've put into it, and so can the review committee. They can tell how much time and effort you've put into it, and that also reflects in their decision, right? They're not going to necessarily choose somebody who they can tell wrote it overnight, because that kind of speaks to your morals a little bit, right? And they're going to choose one that they can see has a lot of effort put into it. So, and then I guess the last little bit of that is have someone you trust review your application for you. So whether that be like a peer or a sibling or a teacher, preferably someone who has like the academic capacity or the intellectual capacity to give you some good feedback on that. Maybe mom or dad or grandma or grandpa can do that as well. But have someone look at it for you. And that's a huge value. I always have someone look over my applications, because no matter how great I think I've articulated myself, there's someone that will always say, well, I don't really know what you mean here, or you could have done this better. So, that's the last tip kind of there. And I guess one of the things that I mentioned before is that there's scholarships for everyone out there. So regardless of your GPA, your age, your program, your socioeconomic status, there's scholarships out there for everyone. And, I'm in the process of writing quite a few scholarships right now. I had one come back recently that was successful. So, if that's a little bit of motivation for you guys, I promise my tips do work. And I hope that, everyone else can find some value in those as well. But to just sort of sum up everything I talked about today, the 5 tips, the one is to start going to your community and start getting involved in your community early before you even start the writing process. Invest some time in researching these opportunities before you're applying, and making a list of what ones you want to apply to, when the due dates are, and sort of what those entail. Then, strategize and prioritize which ones you're going to apply to, how you're going to use your time wisely. And make sure you're following instructions. That's the 4th tip. Do what is asked of you. Don't do more and don't do less. I know it's a tough thing to try and follow, but organizations will look for you to follow instructions when looking at the quality of your application. And then the 5th one is to look early and look often, because there's always new opportunities coming up. There's always new scholarships being released or being sort of added. So make sure you're taking the time to look at those opportunities as often as you can, as frequently as you can. But those are my 5 tips. I hope those are useful for someone out there who's applying from high school or for their undergrad or graduate school. I wish you the best of luck in your scholarship application going forward, and reach out if you have any questions, by all means. But until then, we'll see you on the next episode of Financially Speaking. It's been an absolute pleasure. Take care, everyone.
Thank you for choosing to listen to Financially Speaking Radio Show. Kathy Cook-Noble will return next Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. 3 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Mountain, and 1 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. We hope you'll join us. Until then, have the best week of your life by making the choices that bring you all that you desire.